good evening. Sometimes you're sleeping or nodding off, maybe after watching a documentary, maybe. My friend Ian sent me a documentary this evening, or a link to one, and I thought, oh, well, I'll see what on earth Ian's up to now. So he sent me this documentary. It's an English one. A lot of these, I can honestly say, thought-provoking, but also very depressing videos. I don't want you to go just because it's depressing, because it's more than that. And that is that there is a link, I think, for many people who choose to come and live in foreign countries. I think it's true to say that many of us have realized once and for all that getting old is something we can't escape. But what also comes with getting old is that we get to the point where going to work or attempting to do a job is becoming a bit too much for us. And therefore, I suppose, look forward to the unknown, that is a retirement. Once we realise that what we thought was quite a comfortable amount of money in the bank, or maybe assets that could certainly arrive at that point, is sold, that the money that is there for you in your old age by way of either investments that pay a dividend every month, or in fact a state pension, which is often referred to as old age pension, isn't enough for you to keep a certain amount of sanity in your old age, where you don't have to be stressed anymore. After all, you've given up work. You've got to a point where now you want to start supposedly enjoying the golden years. And for many of us who come here, whether from America, Australasia, or Europe, the Western world, where we have the benefit of having a state pension, Department of Social Security payments. Unfortunately, Americans tend to, those that find themselves in a more financial position than maybe most, only because of maybe they like to tell you that they make good financial decisions. But I don't think so. I just think that Americans, for the main majority, have probably been overpaid during their lifetime compared to those of other countries, and it's just starting now to catch up with them, to realise that even though they get a lot of American dollars, those dollars don't always buy them a lot in their own country. But for those that have come from Australia, New Zealand, England and Europe, I think for the last couple of decades now, people in jobs have been chosen to be a little bit blind to what's going on around them. They're just nose down, tail up, trying to make a living. And every which way they've managed to just stay afloat, and maybe a little bit extra as well. I have family members that appear on the face of it to be what most people would describe as quite wealthy. But really are they? They're not really. They're blue-collar workers. They're still working, and their children also win jobs and working. But they're finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. But the grandparents appear on the face of it to be living a fairly comfortable life. But that's because they've paid their home off. That's because the car is more recent, is maybe a year, 2 years old. and they've been able to afford overseas holidays on a regular basis to entertain in what would be called a pub in England, a drinking house, and in a way forget the other people, that we don't see. In England, as an example, and I'm quoting a documentary that is called Skint, Skint, which in English common language is meaning you've got no money. Now in England, they've taken away a lot of opportunities for people who, at the lower end of the scale, people maybe Americans might describe as losers, people who fall through the cracks. They don't have the ability to hold down a proper job. They often let their health get overlooked. They tend to create lots of children, grandchildren, and it's a perpetual, dreadful life, really, where they dart back and forth between pawnbrokers, taking the valuables that they have acquired back and forth to borrow money to make ends meet. And those people, in every society, I believe, tend to get put aside in the sense that we just don't see them. They're invisible to us. We're happy that we have a job. We're happy that we're able to do all the things that we think we need to do to have a happy life. But for us to do that, once we start to retire, we're then not in the same position, because I'll give you an example. If I was tiling, just doing tiling, floor tiling, bathroom tiling, roof tiling, whatever it is, as a self-employed contractor, I can guarantee that most of us often don't worry about money, because as long as there's jobs coming in, we feel confident that the future is rosy. But the moment, of course, that lifestyle stops and you become retired, the amount of money you get is every fortnight. Most of the social security payments, which are the old age pension, are paid every 2 weeks. Now, when you're self-employed, you might do a job for 3 or 4 days, get a nice lump sum, move on to the next one. So there's always large sums of money coming in and out. Sure, you have to do your books, work out what your tax is, try and work out the minimal amount that you have to pay so that you end up with a larger sum in your own hand. If you're on a salary or a wage, you're a bit closer to being on unemployment or a pension, because I don't really see unemployment payments any different from that of being on a pension. The only difference is that unemployment is really generally supposed to be for a short period of time. But if you look at the statistics around the world, the unemployment for a number of weeks or months of a year is getting higher and higher. And some people just stay on it virtually continuously. And then they just drift from that to getting an old age pension. But after having many years of living on a unemployment benefit, I would well imagine that there's not that much difference once you get to an old age pension. It's just changes of name. Dreadful thought, but so many of you, funny, 10 to 10, and somebody still driving their vehicle out there, revving the motors up. No consideration of others, but that's not what we're here to talk about. This is not supposed to be a depressing video either. It's highlighting the fact that a lot of you out there watch these beaches, the beautiful kids, the smiling faces, and you take it for granted that because you're now living here as a foreigner and appearing to be living quite comfortably, even on an old age pension, we also forget that the ones that we choose not to see in our own country because we're too busy making ends meet. Sure, prices go up and we just sort of say, oh, well, that's inflation for you. And we just hope that we'll be able to earn a little bit more to fill that gap. But here in the Philippines, of course, poverty is everywhere. Not everybody has a four-wheel drive. Not everybody has a nice home to live in. And in fact, the majority don't. They work hard to achieve what they can. And when I say they work hard to achieve it, it's a bit like, again, the concept that when I was a little younger, I always thought it would be a great idea to buy a couple of acres of land, build a farm building on it, line it up like a house, and live sort of off-grid and reduce the financial footprint of the home. Whereas those that were the general public were locked into a 25, 30-year mortgage to buy their home. I was always wondering when they fell behind how they were going to catch up with their mortgage payments to the bank. But here in the Philippines, of course, many of those that we would call poor live their whole lives like that. But I don't think they live in despair like they do in the UK, or if the same was to be shown in documentary form from Australia or New Zealand the same way. But I'm pretty sure that it will be a very comparative documentary. But added to all that, of course, is that for the people in the UK, facing each day like that must be horrendous. It must be really difficult for the children growing up, not really knowing anything about the real world, but growing up to become the next generation with that kind of surrounding poverty, which we don't think is in the West. So it's not surprising that many English people, Australians, Kiwis, and Europeans, who are brave enough, and I say brave enough, to get on a plane and come all the way to the Philippines and to try and make a new life, or should I say, better themselves from what they would have been facing back home, because it is trying to better yourself. It's the last bastion to do that. There are few places in the world that you can still do that, where you can take your pension, receive your pension, and live overseas. Now, from a government point of view, you're saving them a lot of money. You're not a burden on their health system. England, you're not a burden on the NHS. In Australia, you're not a burden on Medicare. All of these things add to the benefit of those countries' governments. But you come over here with a big risk, and that is that if something really bad happened to you, that may well be the end. Not saying it will be. The health system here is pretty good. And when I say pretty good, caring, fundamental, and very basic. But it still costs you. But on a pension, unless you're saving money for those events, it could become that costly, it might affect your life. But again, if you're in the UK and Australia, you've already fallen through the cracks. What is the hope for you then if you didn't have a home? If you're living in some sort of low-cost accommodation, but still having to choose what type of food you're going to eat, what you can afford. Well, the difference is that if you come here, you don't have that even in your mind. In a way, it vanishes. Because, yes, I know they say we're all millionaires, but that's only in their eyes. Filipinos looking at us think we're so wealthy. We've flown here, we've done it freely, and that we now have a pension to live on, something that they would just blow their mind to have. Sure, some government agencies here pay a very small pension to the government workers after 25, 30 years working for them. But I can assure you it's not a livable wage. But for us, we're lucky. We're the lucky ones. And a lot of us are baby boomers, and we've come from what we hoped would be a place that we could stay and grow old in. After all, most of us, I think, still love our home. I must admit that England is not England anymore. England is now every nation sponging off the English to the point now where it's hard to recognize it, apart from the physical aspects of England. All the rows of houses look the same. The overcast days look the same. Even when you come for a holiday, you fly in beautiful sunlight above you as you cut through this smoggy, grey mass to come down underneath the clouds and discover rain, drizzle, cold, misery. It's hard to not see it. It's hard to see that even the local governments are actually finding it hard to provide the services that we all grew up with. Rubbish collection, medical help, all those things. When you used to be able to go and make an appointment in the morning to see the doctor in the afternoon or the evening surgery. Those days are gone. Now you're lucky if when you come back from overseas, unless you say you're private and going to pay for it, you're very unlikely to see a doctor in 2 or 3 weeks if you're lucky. If you want to spend the next 24 hours sitting at a local hospital hoping to get somebody to see an ailment, again, you might be sitting in a corridor on a trolley. But all those horrible images are reality. They're the reality of successive governments who've allowed their greed and total incompetence at running the country for us. They're so busy spouting off to each other from around the world, having wonderful silver service meals with cheap labour serving them the meals, becoming almost like the Kardashians, and you and I have been paying for it. That there is no money in the chest anymore. The money that they collected that used to run those services no longer is enough because they're buying the latest model missiles, having the strongest government armies and navies and air force. What for? Why do they always have to be feeling that they have to defend the country? Calling the people to arms in a time of need, I can understand that. The idea of conscription, the idea of national service, all gone out the window. Now it's all the latest gear. Just had a recent parade in Washington. And again, it's like looking back at the era of the USSR, Red Square, Tiananmen Square, all of the weapons of war being displayed as trophies almost for these politicians. And guys, that money comes from somewhere. You. And they spend your money like there's no tomorrow. Let's have an inquiry into this. Let's have an inquiry into that. Let's change the law. Let's charge for this. Let's charge for that. They've been slowly taking away everything that you've worked hard for. That now when you need it as you get old, there's going to be very little, if any, left in the coppers to pay you. My children will be lucky if they get an old age pension. They will be so downtrodden by society. The only ones that will have the money will be the rich. And they will slowly become poorer as well, because you can't have something one day for £10 and then a couple of years later that's now £30. Why? The wages haven't gone up in 3 years. So where has the money gone up? Why is it that the cost of making it has gone up? Tax has gone up. There's so much in relation to the greed of the world. It's affected us all. That's why we come here. Sunshine, smiling people. Again, it's almost like we're back in work, but we're on a pension. We're able to block out the reality. Sure, we're going to see poor people here. We're going to probably donate money to them. Did you ever think you could donate money when you're on a pension? You can here. And that gives you hope. It makes you feel better helping people. So much is on these blogs that come out in the Philippines are talking about, I do it myself, talk about the different attitudes and concepts of a relationship. Sure, many of you will discover that that's a reality here. It's because they're Filipino. That's why. But beyond that, we're one of the last places on this planet where a retiree can hold your head up high and be a worthwhile person again, instead of slipping into that miserable, dreadful feeling of being unnoticed, unwanted, and no longer of any use to society. Whereas here we're treated with respect. As we're elder, we also seem to get the girls. So no, we get a sort of like winning the lottery, isn't it? We get to have beautiful people around us. We get to spoil them. We get to enjoy life again. And we also realize how lucky we are. So, whilst you might look at a miserable documentary, which reminds you why you're here, try not to remember or to suggest that you're here for any other reason, but to live your life out comfortably without the pressures. Forget about those Americans. Sorry, guys, you do it. Not all of you, but a lot of you do. You jam it down our throats that you're so wealthy, that you're so lucky, that we're losers because we have old age pension only, and maybe what we would consider a sizable amount of money to build a home. But you guys, you carry on. The ones that you know the ones I'm talking about, the ones that have done all their so-called heroic acts in life, that they're now also living on some form of a benefit, whether it's a disability pension, whether it's social security, whether it's a 401, congratulations, guys. We're not interested in you. And the reality is, only Americans like to brag about themselves. I don't like to think that I brag about my achievements in life. People who know me know of my achievements. And my family, they're the ones that matter. So while you fall over yourselves telling everybody that, oh, I wouldn't build, I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't give her that, I would hold on to this, I would dump her, I'd move on. What an empty, shallow life you live. Most Americans are like us Brits. They don't make a lot of noise. They do just get on and enjoy life. And you really can do that here. And I think that we need to stay positive. And we also realize that we can be happy here. We don't have to wake up each morning in the cold. We don't have to feel that there is no hope. And I do feel so much for those out there that are putting up with the policies of governments back home that have allowed the rampant invasions of their country to the extent that the country that we all grew up in is no longer. It's a dreadful place. It's like a stew, and you've forgotten what the original recipe is. It's just a bit of this, a bit of that. And it's terrible. And it's not racist to think that way. Sadly, you cannot create or leave a country the way it was unless you're prepared to stand up as a nation and say enough is enough. Unfortunately, a lot of these countries in the West have gone beyond that. They've fallen over backwards helping people, effectively con them into believing they're in desperate need. These people have travelled from all over the world to seek a better life than they can achieve in their own country. And unfortunately, the politicians have used that to further their own benefits by letting them in, by being humanitarian. You can't be in dire strait if you have to travel over a dozen countries to get to one that gives you the most. Because if you're desperate, you're adventurous, you're willing to work hard, wouldn't you stop at the next one? Would you not get off at the next bus stop? Why would you go to the end of the line? Or is the end of the line the only one that you were aiming for in the first place? England's gone down to the point where I don't think it'll ever be the same. It's very hard to imagine England the way it really was. And I think also Australia and New Zealand are in the same boat. Sadly, we've allowed our own stupid choices to permit the politicians, the ones that we asked to make our lives better, we've allowed them to completely ruin it. They have a dream as if they got all the answers. These are people who never had a job in their lives, not a real job like you and me. They're people who just like their own voice. They just like, in a sense, they love the flashing cameras and people interviewing them. They feel like superstars. And we're letting people like that rule your everyday life. No wonder there's so much disruption in these Western countries now. You couldn't do it here. Oh, my goodness, no way. And you would not expect to, because people here just knuckle down and they do their best to get through. There is no social security to talk of, really, in a country like the Philippines or any Asian country. So the way they get through there, in some cases, dreadful lives, they do it the only way they know how. Hard work, trying to have a bit of hope, and just knuckling down. Stop complaining. Get on there. Nothing's for free. I have rambled on a bit, but those were my thoughts this evening. And I thought, I'm not going to let them go by without sharing it. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please don't forget to give us a thumbs up. I think a lot of you are getting a bit lazy. If you like listening to a thought for the day, please give us a thumbs up. It's not the subscribers, it's the thumbs up that bring people back to add really interesting comments. So you have a nice evening. It's Monday soon, and a start of another week. Bye now.